Democratic response this evening is from Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware. He's addressing the nation from his office on Capitol Hill.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a job to do. We all have a job to do. We speak with great concern about the drug problem in America today, but we fail to appreciate or address it for what it really is. The number one threat to our national security. It affects the readiness of our Army, the productivity of our workers, and the achievement of our students, and the very health and safety of our families. America is under attack, literally, under attack by an enemy who is well-financed, well-supplied, and well-armed, and fully capable of declaring total war against the nation and its people, as we've seen in Colombia. Here in America, the enemy is already ashore, and for the first time, we are fighting and losing a war on our own soil. Every president for the past 2 decades, Democrat and Republican alike, has declared war on drugs, and each of them has lost that war and lost it miserably. They lost because they attempted to deal with only part of the drug problem. They lost because their initiatives were pulled apart by bureaucratic squabbling among their advisors. They lost because they always did too little and they did it too late. That's why the Democrats and Republicans in the Congress got together last year to write the law that required the President to give us a national drug strategy. The one you heard tonight. You heard him deliver it. We don't oppose the President's plan. All we want to do is strengthen it. We don't doubt his resolve. All we want to do is stiffen it. The trouble is that the President's proposals are not big enough to deal with the problem. His rhetoric isn't matched by the resources we need to get the job done. Quite frankly, the President's plan's not tough enough, bold enough, or imaginative enough to meet the crisis at hand. If you had a child in your family that was seriously ill, I doubt whether you'd call a family meeting to discuss what percentage of the family budget you were willing to spend to make him well. You wouldn't say that we can't afford to spend more than a penny out of every dollar the family has to cure the child. But that's exactly what the President would have us do. Spend one penny out of every tax dollar to fight drugs. The Defense Department spends $300 billion a year to prepare for a war we hope we'll never have to fight. But the President says he wants to spend only $8 billion next year on a war we're already fighting and we're losing. The President says he wants to wage a war on drugs, but if that's true, what we need is another D-Day, not another Vietnam, not another limited war fought on the cheap and destined for stalemate and human tragedy. Now I'm going to point out some specific things, 6 of them, that we find inadequate about the President's plan. I think the President has to join us in making a significantly greater commitment to these 6 areas to stem the rising tide of violence in America, and that's what it is, violence. First, we have to join together to ensure that drug dealers are punished swiftly, surely, and severely. And in line with what the President is calling for, we have to hold every drug user accountable. Because if there were no drug users, there would be no appetite for drugs and there'd be no market for them. Let's take a look at what the real problem is. It's not just how many people are using drugs. As the President said, the number of people using drugs, cocaine in particular, is down in our country. That's true. But the violence associated with drugs is spewing out all over America, and that's terrible. I know it's hard to believe, but this very day, violent drug offenders will commit more than 100,000 crimes on this day alone. And the sad part is that we have no more police in the streets of our major cities than we had 10 years ago. And what the President proposes won't help much. What he proposes is no increase over what the Congress has already approved last year. In a nutshell, the President's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. That's why right now, 6 out of every 10 criminals who are arrested on drug charges have their cases dropped. That's why we think the President should triple the commitment that he's made tonight for police, prosecutors, and judges for our cities and our states. Second, education. The President says he's increasing money for drug education because he knows what we know. It works. We found out that when students understand how harmful cocaine is, they're 5 times less likely to even try the drug. And right now, the drug education message is reaching only 50% of the children in this country. And the President's plan, for all the talk, will only increase our efforts by 5%. You know, drug education is the only vaccine we have against the drug abuse among our young. And can you imagine me sitting before you and saying, we're only going to vaccinate 50% of the children against polio or smallpox? We have to do more. We have to educate our children about the dangers of drugs. We have to start in kindergarten, because we know that last year 1 out of every 4 high school students in America tried drugs, and that the other 3 were prime targets of drug pushers. We can't afford to lose a generation while we're sorting out the budgetary priorities of this nation. We must do more, and now. Third, we disagree with the President's decision to cut back on our previous commitment to protect against drugs coming across the border, to cut the Customs Service, the Coast Guard, and the Border Patrol. We think we should do more to stem the flow of drugs across our borders, and we think we should go one step further. Let's go after the drug lords where they live, with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it. Fourth, the experts tell us there are 6.5 million addicts, addicted drug addicts out there, and that they're committing thousands upon thousands of crimes. And under the President's plan, we'll treat only 19 out of 100 addicts. He talked about pregnant women. Well, his proposal would help only 1/4 of the children under the age of 16 who are addicted, and 1/4 of the women who are pregnant and addicted. We can do better than that to prevent the next generation from becoming a generation of violence. Fifth, the President has to take charge and end the bureaucratic infighting that plagues the anti-drug efforts now. Last year, for example, and listen to this, last year the Congress approved $5 million to protect Colombian judges, providing the kind of support that the Colombian Justice Minister, Mrs. DeGrief, recently asked for in Washington. Yet not a single penny of that $5 million arrived in Bogota, Colombia, before the Justice Minister arrived in the United States a couple weeks ago. And the President's plan does nothing to prevent such fiascos from happening in the future. He must eliminate the duplication among drug-fighting agencies and end the waste. That's one of the main reasons why we created the drug czar in the first place. The last thing I'd like to say about the strategy the President proposes is that we have to make a greater investment in the scientific community. The scientific community that's pursuing innovative approaches for fighting the drug crisis, just as we do for cancer and for AIDS and for Alzheimer's. They're already at work. In a lab in Delaware, scientists are working on new medicines that may block an addict's craving for drugs. And across the country in Los Alamos weapons laboratories, other scientists are exploring new state-of-the-art techniques to battle the narco-terrorist. We need more of that kind of scientific enterprise. We need to enlist America's scientific muscle in turning back the drug traffickers. You know, listening to both of us, this may seem all complicated, very complicated, but it isn't. We know what has to be done. We have to educate our children not to take drugs. Reach our children who are on drugs and get them off. We have to lock up the dealers for a long, long time. And we have to attack the source from which the drugs come. And we have to do that not a piece at a time, but all at once. And we have to do it now. And there's not any reason why we can't do that. We have the power, we have the money, and we have the knowledge. And we don't have to promise a world without worry or fear. We're not asking for that much. All we have to do together is to keep our promises and stay together. To put it in very personal terms for a moment, Joe Biden, me, I would settle for a world in which I could worry about the same kinds of things that my parents worried about, in which I only had to worry about the grades my children got in school rather than the drugs they're being exposed to, in which I only had to worry about the prices my wife had to pay at the supermarket instead of fearing that she might get mugged by a junkie in the parking lot as she loads her groceries into the car, in which tonight I could call my mom just to wish her pleasant dreams, not for the purpose of making sure she's safe in her own home. That's the kind of world I want. That's the kind of world you deserve. And there's no reason we can't have it. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Democratic response to President Bush's this evening, outlining the administration's anti-drug policy. You heard the Democratic response from Senator Joseph